Hour number 3 of the early line on this Thursday starts right here, right now, all across the SportsGrid network. I am Ben Stevens. He is Donnie Rightside. We've done 2 hours of this show, one final hour up until 11 a.m. Eastern time. And even in the previous 2 hours, after a wild 24-hour news cycle around the sports landscape, I'm still spinning a little bit with all the news we have received in the coaching carousel in the NFL and college football in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, it was the first stunner in Seattle, Donnie. Pete Carroll, after 14 seasons as the Seahawks head coach, is out as the head man in the Pacific Northwest. Then, the stunner of all stunners, Nick Saban retiring after 17 years in Tuscaloosa as Alabama's head coach. And then one that was expected, but still shocking when it actually comes to fruition, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots mutually agreeing to part ways this morning after 24 NFL seasons together. What a wild ride it has been the last 24 hours here on the early line and really in the sports landscape.
Yeah, one of those polls that you would look at maybe at the beginning of the year, like who's more likely to move on from their coaching position? Like, I don't know, maybe one of those. No, all three happened within a 24-hour span, which is incredible stuff, which leaves a lot of question marks as well. Who's going to take over for Bill Belichick? Is it an in-house guy? Is Mike Vrabel now become the man that's going to come back there as the Patriot way inside the building? Nick Saban has been an institution at Alabama. Where do they move? And also, what is going to be the layover from that? Will they get a fantastic head coach? Can they keep the recruits? And also what is going to take place in the upcoming seasons where the expectation in Alabama is national championships, not just making the college football playoff. As we welcome in the radio audience, you're watching this thing live to the Early Line Thursday morning edition. Donnie Rightside, Ben Stevens, Sirius XM channel 159. And then, of course, with Pete Carroll coming in with that 25% of the votes, where he is going to go, if he's going anywhere, or if he just gives that semi-retirement here and heads off into the front office as a consultant for the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah. But it's wild in this 24-hour structure. And basically, too, it's not just 24 hours. Like, this news broke here about Bill Belichick being separated from the Patriots moments before we went on the air. So these are stuff that we're reacting to in real time. It's fun to see where they go. And also, over the next 24 to 48 hours, a lot of these answers will already be filled in on where these organizations go.
Where these organizations go, what is next for Bill Belichick? He has a desire to continue coaching. We'll see if Pete Carroll does the same. 72 years old now in an advisory role with the Seattle organization. Nick Saban, for the moment, is retiring from the sport for good. 72 years old, 28 years as a head coach in college football. Nobody in the long and illustrious history of the sport since the modern era has been underway, since the AP poll was released in the late 1930s, has won more national championships as a head coach than Nick Saban. 7 national titles, 6 in Tuscaloosa, 1 in Baton Rouge with the LSU Tigers. And Nick Saban, wherever he went, Toledo, Michigan State, LSU, Alabama, was a staple of continued high-level success, dominance in college football as well. And Donnie, it's one of the weird things about what we do here, looking back on the time that these guys have served in their respective positions with their current organizations, in what it meant, the history that was made together. We're talking about Pete Carroll, the shortest tenured head coach at his respective spot that he is now leaving. 14 years is the shortest tenure. Nick Saban, 17 years in Tuscaloosa, and Bill Belichick, nearly 2.5 decades, 24 seasons in Foxborough. So it is an end of an era in every one of these spots. So it's what these teams and programs will do moving forward for who that next head coach is that has to fill very lofty shoes. It's also looking back and reflecting on the time that was a celebration of Nick Saban, who is now, it seems, done as a head coach in college football. We look back on 24 years in New England for Bill Belichick, but he still has more history to write. Only 14 wins behind Don Shula, who has 347, 333 for Bill Belichick to become the winningest all-time head coach in the history of the NFL. And although he's an advisor at this moment, you look at Pete Carroll in his press conference, the most youthful 72-year-old the world has probably ever seen. I'm not so sure he's done coaching in the National Football League or somewhere, Donnie, as he keeps it rolling throughout his football career.
No, it certainly will. I brought up the joke yesterday on radio on Moneyline. Like usually, when you're with an organization or for an institution or a corporation for, let's just say, 15 to 20 years, you get the retirement. They give you the nice little gold watch, right, with the engraving on the back. Thanks for your 25 years of service. Enjoy retirement. Pete Carroll's going to get those Air Monarchs here in gold and given to him as he goes on a present here away from the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know where he's going at this point, but I did bring up some options for him that I think that would make some sense just to help rebuild an organization, or even not even that so much. Like, he's going to go to the front office of Seattle, which again is a nice way of saying, like, hey, Pete, love you here, hang around, put your input in. But maybe he is a front office guy somewhere else around the league where he can actually help and guide that franchise in a new direction, help with the coaching searches, help with the assistant coaches, maybe talking to free agents here. There's a lot he can still offer up, because you're right. This wasn't like, hey, you know what? I told you I was coming back yesterday. Then 24 hours later, I had to rethink this. Like, I don't know if I have the energy to do this. I'd rather spend some time with the grandkids. And you get those stories here. But what we were hearing from him was, look, I'm not done yet. So basically, if anybody wants an interview or a job, I'm up for it. And I got a lot of energy and a lot still to give here in my NFL career.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one to see where that one pans out. But I love this because, again, the coaching wheels, this isn't the hot stove in Major League Baseball. Hey, where's this top free agent going to go? It's going to take 3 months. Bill Belichick is probably going to be signed, sealed, and delivered by the end of this weekend. Nick Saban's going to have news of where he's going to go in the broadcasting field. Pete Carroll might take a little bit more time because I'm not so sure he's going to be another head coach, but that's the great thing about it. Time moves fast in professional sports, and we'll get a lot of these answered quickly here, Ben.
8 head coaching vacancies in the National Football League. As for Alabama, the Crimson Tide, it has been reported, wants to have their next head coach in place in the next 72 hours. Things move very quickly in college football. You want to retain your roster, keep them out of the transfer portal, keep those new recruits and commits that you had signed just earlier this month as a part, well, actually back in December now, but just a few weeks ago as a part of your football program. Seismic shoes to fill in Tuscaloosa after 17 years and 6 national championships led by Nick Saban. And Donnie, we talked about Bill Belichick's future yesterday on the show. We mentioned the timeline, when it would happen. You said by end of day Friday, and sure enough, it happens on this Thursday morning. Part of the conversation we had was Bill Belichick, not just the head coach, but the general manager, and where that really went awry in New England. Some of the front office decisions that Belichick had made had plagued this New England franchise after Tom Brady left for Tampa Bay. I hope for Bill's sake, because he's still one of the great football minds we've ever seen in this sport, regardless of level, I hope that wherever he goes next, probably he will have a say in front office decisions, but he focuses solely on being a head coach once again. So much football conversation coming your way with Mike Blewitt up next.
It's a lot of fun to do because you could kind of place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't
favorite.
care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Whites said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. BV. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Let's get you NFL playoff ready. Live right here on this Thursday morning, just 2 days out from the start of the NFL postseason on the early line. I am Ben Stevens. He is Donnie Rightside. And joining us live from Phoenix, Arizona, scouting the site of last year's Super Bowl to get you ready for Super Bowl 58, it is Mike Blewitt here on this Thursday morning on the early line. Blue, before we get into the postseason, around the National Football League, of course, the last 24 hours have been chaotic and dramatic in the coaching carousel. We focus on the NFL. Early this morning, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots parting ways after 24 seasons together. And then yesterday afternoon, Seattle letting go of Pete Carroll as its head coach. He transitions to an advisory role within the organization, but no longer the head man in the Pacific Northwest. What was your main takeaway, Blewitt, from all the news we have seen in the last 24 hours?
I think the Belichick thing, and I've been watching a lot of coverage on it, as have all of us, and I think the Belichick thing is a shock to the system, but I don't think it's an outright surprise. There's been a lot of discussion about it recently. Both of these coaches, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, are in their 70s. At some point, all good things must come to an end. So it seems as if there is a very short but real that the Patriots have with Gerard Mayo and former players and Mike Vrabel and former executive and Brian Flores and coach and Brian Flores. I think that's a real list for Belichick. Obviously, what he has done in winning championships is unmatched. I will be curious to see if he does go after these jobs where people are rumoring him to go, like Atlanta, like the Chargers. It doesn't feel like a fit, but that's probably only because we've seen Bill Belichick wearing Patriots gear for the last 24 seasons.
Yeah, shocking moves for sure yesterday in the NFL and college football coaching ranks, but maybe another shock to the system for the AFC for you here, Mike Blewitt. Those Pittsburgh Steelers sit at a 60-1 price here to win the AFC. Why? Because they actually made the playoffs with a little bit of help from the Tennessee Titans last week. If we are buying right now in the AFC, what's an odds market you're looking to dip into? Is it the Cleveland Browns? Is it your Pittsburgh Steelers? Or is it the chalk in the Baltimore Ravens for you, Mike?
I think it's going to be really hard for me to look outside of the chalk. I think anytime you have the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes at 5-1 or more, I think it's an interesting price that you're going to take a look at. But I think there's what we've really learned in the AFC is that these teams, as tough as we thought the AFC was, and it was tough, especially down to the end, it was, as I've said before on this show, is because we started finding a lot of flaws in these teams. The only team really that has gone somewhat flawless through this season, especially towards the end of the season, was the Baltimore Ravens. And even they lost a game last week in which they rested all of their key players. So I think it's a Ravens-Bills are the two markets you're really looking at, but it doesn't mean we don't have some exciting games this weekend. And in fact, I like the Texans to win it outright over Cleveland on Saturday afternoon. So I think some of the long shots in the AFC are just too difficult. Steelers missing their best player, Miami very banged up. I think it's going to be a little tougher to dive deep in either of the conferences this season.
So at least outright chalk in 2 of the 3 playoff matchups in the AFC this weekend, but maybe Houston as a home underdog holding serve in H-Town. Same question, Blue, but to the NFC. The Lions, a 3-point favorite. The Cowboys north of a touchdown, and the Eagles, a 3-point road favorite on the road in Tampa. What is the most intriguing matchup in your estimation on the NFC side of things?
A lot of intrigue, I think, in the NFC this weekend specifically. We have a Philly team that came inches away basically from winning the Super Bowl last year, and they've fallen apart, and they're at risk now at Tampa. A Tampa team that maybe doesn't wow anybody, but they played solid football and earned their way into the playoffs. Eagles falling apart. Lots of talk of coaching strife. There's references this morning on coverage as to could that be a possible landing spot if the Eagles dump out of the playoffs? Is that a possible landing spot for one of the big name head coaches like Bill Belichick? So but the other 2 matchups are even more intriguing. Matt Stafford and Jared Goff facing off against one another. I think that would be too much to bear if Matt Stafford comes into Detroit and beats them in their first home playoff game in 3 decades. I think it'd be tough for them to bear, but I really do think that the Rangers, a young team, obviously, and then the Green Bay Packers, the youngest team ever to make the NFL playoffs, have a quarterback that is now even hotter than Dak Prescott. 18 touchdowns to 1 interception since week 11 for Jordan Love. A very young team, a scrappy team, but I think the Dallas Cowboys probably pull this one off. That being said, I think 7.5 is too many points for me. I think the Packers do make it close.
Mike, 3 is the key this weekend. 3 games this weekend in Super Wildcard action have a spread of 3 or less. You take a look at the Monday Night Football game with the Eagles. You also take a look at the game between the Rams and Detroit. But let's focus here on the first game here on Saturday afternoon, 4:30 p.m. That's the Cleveland Browns, and that is the Houston Texans. This is a rematch, but certainly different players on the field. Most notably, C.J. Stroud will be the starting quarterback here for Houston. In their earlier matchup in Houston, he wasn't there. But Cleveland was able to get after that Houston defense. This line currently, Mike, -2.5 as a favorite for the road team, Cleveland Browns, a total of 44.5. What are we looking at in this game from your perspective?
I think the line does make sense, right? You have a rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. The Cleveland Browns defense does get after it. To your point, Donnie, the opposite happened in that first matchup, 36 points for the Cleveland Browns. But I just keep coming back to, as I'm evaluating this game, the Houston Texans, one of the top teams in the league in takeaways. Flacco has been throwing interceptions since he came back, throwing interceptions at a 4% clip, which is about 3 times higher than the average. So he's slinging it, and it's a fun story, and everybody's backing Flacco. I just think that these turnovers could be a problem. Cleveland, one of the worst teams in the league, turning the ball over, and Houston, one of the best teams in the league in takeaways. So that's a -9 Cleveland on the season in turnover differential, whereas Houston is +10. I think that's a big factor, and it's why I like the Texans to win it outright.
Joe Flacco to throw an interception in the first game of this NFL postseason on Saturday in Houston is -148, despite throwing for 368 and 3 touchdowns against this very Texans team in H-Town just a few weeks ago. Week number 16, he did have 2 INTs on that day. Blewitt, as we look at the other key matchups that have that flat field goal number, Detroit and Philadelphia, both at that flat number of 3. In which of those 2 games do you think that key number of 3 will be most important?
It's a really good question, because I think it may be important in both of them. I like the Lions to be victorious here. I do think that still one of the issues for the Rams, they're a young team playing really well, but I think somebody like Goff and Ben Johnson doing a great job of being the architect of this offense, I think they can take advantage of a younger defensive backfield of Los Angeles. I think that's going to be a key here. I'd expect points. There are oftentimes in playoff games where teams are checking each other, and It's not as aggressive offensively as you may see. I don't think that happens at all. Dan Campbell has shown to be one of the most aggressive coaches in the league, and I think he gets after this defensive backfield early. So I like the Lions a little bit more comfortably than Philly and Tampa. I think that sounds just about right. I think that's a 3-point game.
51.5 Sunday Night Football. All of the storylines that will be featured in Detroit. The Lions' first home playoff game in 3 decades, trying to win their first playoff game in 32 years since 1991's NFL season. The return of Matthew Stafford, the reunion of Jared Goff and Sean McVay in what appears to be just a great football game with the highest point total of the weekend, 51.5. Blue, before we let you go into the desert sun, anything else you want to add?
Absolutely. I think you can expect that Nick Saban does end up at College game day. You heard it here. It's a lock. Do not worry about any of the other reports you see about big noon kickoff. He will end up at College game day this fall. Doesn't mean he's replacing Corso yet, but that's where he'll be.
Mike Blewitt, breaking news. We're back on the early line next.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Coates, the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Let's preview tonight's Hardwood Handicaps live right here on this Thursday. on the early line on SportsGrid. A marquee matchup out in the Eastern Conference between the two teams with the two best records out east. Nobody is really catching the Boston Celtics at this moment. The season overtime victory against the second best team in the NBA right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Yesterday, Boston, Donnie, 29-8. 21 games above 500, a perfect 18-0 inside TD Garden. But tonight, second leg of a back-to-back on the road inside the Pfizer Forum against the Bucks. Milwaukee booked as a 4.5-point favorite. This will be just the second game this year Boston has been booked as an underdog. They won outright in their only game as a dog. Over under 242.5. The Bucks have been struggling as of late. They've lost 4 of their last 5, including a 16-point defeat against the Jazz as an 8-point favorite. They have not covered in any of these 5 games on this recent skid. It's gotten so bad that Giannis Antetokounmpo has called out the equipment manager in the locker room for Milwaukee. What happens tonight inside the Pfizer Forum?
Yeah, I'm going to back the Milwaukee Bucks in this game. I'll lay the minus 4.5 points because, quite frankly, the Boston Celtics had a great game last night, but it did go to overtime in their own building. Now they got to catch a flight out to Milwaukee, which, again, it's not coast to coast, but also keep in mind, you have a team that's been off for a few days here in Milwaukee, something that we don't talk about a lot in the NBA as well, like we do in the NFL. Time to prepare and get ready. This is a big game for the Milwaukee Bucks, but they've also had a couple days for their coaches and also their players to get into the film room, get those tapes, get those designs and new play calls here that they can use for tonight's game. And also, Damian Lillard missed the last game, so maybe he's extra rested and motivated for this game because, quite frankly, it's been a roller coaster season for him. The one thing I do know, Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to be ready for this game. So if there's a points prop that I'm looking at in totality here with a number of around 244 in that range as a total, give me Giannis Antetokounmpo's points to the over in this game. And I do think the Milwaukee Bucks win just based on they're rested and ready and at home. And if they win, it's probably going to be by margin enough to cover the 5 points.
Listen, I keep looking at Dame Lillard to go over his 3 points prop, 3.5. The over is even money right now. The volume is there. The results necessarily have not been, but it's the second leg of a back-to-back. Boston has to change venue now. Milwaukee has that rest advantage. Again, they are just a 4.5-point underdog, the line working their way. They've only been an underdog one other time this year, second leg of a road back-to-back on December 20th in Sacramento after they lost in overtime to the Golden State Warriors the night prior in San Francisco. And Donnie, I remember breaking down that game with you at the end of December. We both said Sacramento laying a short number. They're going to win this game. Boston scored 144 and won by 25 as a 4-point road underdog. Part of the reason why for that scoring output, Derek White. Now, there are points props listed for the C's at the moment. That include Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Brown had 35. Tatum had 45 last night in the victory against the Timberwolves. Kristaps Porzingis is the only other guy with a points prop for Boston. We are breaking down this game prior to 10:30 a.m. Eastern time for a tip tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time in Milwaukee. A lot can change in terms of that expected lineup for the Celtics tonight. But when that prop is listed for Derek White, I will bet the over. Again, it's a 4-game advantage for Boston, Donnie, in the Eastern Conference, 29-8. Despite the struggles for Milwaukee, losers of 4 of their last 5, the Bucks still have that second-best record at 25-12. There's only a 75-cent difference in the Eastern Conference odds, plus 125 for the Celtics, booked as the favorites. The Bucks' second-best number at 2-1. Philadelphia at plus 550 before we have a large drop-off to Miami. Donnie, how close do you think the gap is between Boston and the rest of the East?
I think it is close between Boston and obviously the game tonight. They're going to take on the Milwaukee Bucks. I really do. But outside of that, the Sixers will see. Joel Embiid having a little bit of injury issues with his knee. We know the Miami Heat will be there standing tall at the end of the season and certainly be a tough out. But when you take a look at this graphic on the screen, you see the Celtics at a plus 125 price. And I say to myself, the Celtics are the best team in the Eastern Conference for me. I do believe they win the conference and advance into the NBA Finals. But a plus 125 price, I'm not going to take that now. There's way too many things can happen because here, me out on this, Ben. You say, hey, look, if you think they're going to win, Donnie, take the plus money. Well, what happens if Tatum gets injured or Brown gets injured? Not to say they will, but a plus 125 price is not a 7-to-1 price. Like, oh, you know what? I was going to take a good number here. That's basically you're getting your money back if they win a few months later down the line, and so many things can change. Now, if the Celtics continue to play great basketball, what does that flip to, Ben? A minus 125 price to win the East? So I would hold off on betting the Celtics, even though I do think that they're the class of the East.
Let's just forecast this out. If Boston were to play Milwaukee in an Eastern Conference Finals to cash a championship ticket, Boston would be the favorite. But what would the number be if it's 75 cents of distinction now? Minus 122. It'd be pretty close, is my point here. Is there value? Sure, it's plus money, but we're getting pretty close to even money at this moment, despite the fact I think the Celtics are going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now we go late night out to Los Angeles, 10 p.m. Eastern time. A dead even pick'em at this moment in Los Angeles. It's the Lakers and the Suns, minus 108 money line for L.A., minus 108 money line for Phoenix. Again, a lot of time until we get to tip tonight out in Los Angeles. But at this moment, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, all listed in the prop compartment on the FanDuel Sportsbook, as well as Anthony Davis and LeBron James. A dead pick'em. Who wins in Los Angeles?
Yeah, hey, look, the Lakers trying to put together a little win streak here today. The Phoenix Suns, we're still trying to figure out what they actually have on the court. You take a look at that Booker, Beal, Allen, Durant, and Nurkic. They should win this game going away, but they just haven't gelled yet on the court. Why? Because they haven't played a lot with each other. The one thing I did like out of the past game was Anthony Davis, 41 points. And you know me, Ben, I like to ride the hot hand in that environment. We're looking at a total close to 240 in this game. We're expecting points. I don't see anything less than 30-plus points out of Anthony Davis tonight, giving it his all, because I do think we get scoring tonight, but it is a true coin flip. You take a look at that there. Will the Lakers win? Maybe. Will Phoenix resurrect themselves? Maybe. If we were just betting this game and saying who's supposed to win, of course it's the Phoenix Suns for me with the big three in the lineup, but I can't trust them here. But I do trust Anthony Davis with a big performance tonight for the Los Angeles Lakers.
The Suns were just 3-7 to start off the month of December before winning their final 3 games in 2023 and their first of 2024. Phoenix has either lost 3 of their last 4 or won 5 of their last 9, depending on which side of things you think for the Suns. If they are at full health on the road in a dead pick'em game, this is a game Phoenix has to win. Again, a lot can change in about 12 hours until we get the tip tonight out in Los Angeles. Next game up is an early start out in Paris on the Seine River under the eyes of the Eiffel Tower. It's the Cavaliers and the Nets. Why did they give Wemby the day off and send him over with the San Antonio Spurs and their illustrious French history? Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, out to Paris. Doesn't make any sense to me. Instead, it's the Cavs and the Nets. Cleveland, a 3.5-point favorite. 2 p.m. Eastern time tip here stateside out in France. Over under 224.5. What do you think the game looks like on European soil?
Yeah, by the way, this used to be one of the, like, if we equate it to NFL terms, remember when we first started to go over to the UK, I was like, hey, man, just throw the Jacksonville Jaguars over. They win like 3 games a year. They'll just be happy with that. It is interesting on a big stage here that you're going to send the Nets and the Cavaliers. Now, granted, it's not like sending the Pistons and the Charlotte Bobcats over there at this point now, or the Hornets, whatever they're
Charlotte
called
Bobcats.
now at this
Still
time.
a team, yeah.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly. So, I mean, why not Pelicans? Who cares? I mean, send them over there as well at this point. But if you're taking a look at the game matchup as it is, 224.5, low number for today's NBA numbers, but I'm going to go under specifically because these two teams aren't used to playing in this arena. They're playing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon over here on the East, which means like a different time difference that they're used to at this point. Too many circumstances filtering around. It's not really a handicap for me, but I'm going to take the under just because of the circumstances.
I mean, listen, I'm trying to look for the angle, right? I'm pretty sure Karis LeVert still plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Today, it's not LeVert, though. It's Levert. And I think just being in France, we'll try to find some props there. They don't even have his points prop listed. Both teams, not great covering numbers where they are regarded, according to the spread right now. Cleveland 10-9-2 against the spread as a favorite. Brooklyn 10-12-1 against the spread as an underdog. The Knicks, winners of 5 in a row. Are they trending in a true contending way in the Eastern Conference? The Knicks, a 4-point road favorite tonight in Dallas against the Mavericks. I was a little bit surprised by that line. But can New York make it 6 straight tonight against the Mavs?
Super 6, they're going to get it done tonight. Why is that? Take a look at the Dallas Mavericks' anticipated starting lineup tonight. Kyrie Irving, Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, Derek Jones Jr., and Dwight Powell. Luka Doncic missing from that lineup, so therefore, again, long time we have to wait here until tip-off, but I'm going to go ahead. The Knicks are playing really good and confident basketball, winning by good margin, and you're right. It's interesting to see the Knicks close to a 5-point favorite on the road in Dallas, but again, the reason being, best player is going to sit out for the Mavericks, hot New York Knicks team. Why not the Knicks extending that win streak tonight for me, Ben?
I mean, it has been a perfect 5-game span with OG Anunoby in the lineup. They have won all 5 games. He has been featured as a member of the Knicks. He had his New York high 23 points in the most recent game. And Tom Thibodeau has to be loving what he is seeing right now. Tom Thibodeau, excuse me. For the New York Knicks, they have won their last 5 games. They have covered in their last 5 games. They have gone under in all 5 games. That's Tibbs basketball, baby. Oklahoma City, a 128-120 victory yesterday on the road in Miami. They were booked as the road favorite in South Beach. They covered as a 4-point road favorite. Back home tonight, laying 13 against Portland. The Blazers have been a good covered team. I would look at the Trailblazers making the trip to Oklahoma City. Now some college basketball conversation. Up next, live right here on the early line.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
What a wild time it has been in the world of college sports in the last 48 hours. Joining us live right here on this Thursday on the early line from FanDuel and CBS Sports, it is John Rothstein. 4 of the AP top 5, John Rothstein, in the last 48 hours have been upset on the road by unranked opponents. I'm not sure we'll even be able to sleep in May at this rate.
We definitely won't, Ben. And much like we saw last season where we had a Final Four with no 1 or 2 seeds in the final weekend of the NCAA tournament, I think there is a strong chance that history could repeat itself this year. And not only did we see 4 teams who were high at the polls this week lose in the past 2 nights, we saw 4 teams at the top of the polls lose in situations where the teams that they played, their opponents, were not highly ranked. But Ben, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's not anarchy. It's just college basketball.
It certainly is. And we know it is very difficult to win on the road in conference play. That has always been the case, but it has been historic this week. For the first time ever in a 48-hour window, 4 of the 5 top teams in the country go down on the road, including last night, number 3 Kansas against UCF. The Knights, in one of their first few Big 12 games in program history, hand the number 3 team in the country a loss. KU was a 7.5-point road favorite. UCF wins outright by 5 points. John, is there something you point to as to why we are seeing all of the upsets this week?
Lack of player attention, I think, just has a lot to do with it in college basketball, Ben. We are not seeing the rhythm and the chemistry that you and I grew up with in terms of college basketball having a high level of player attention. That's directly related to the transfer portal. Teams are not as familiar with one another as they were in years prior. But with all that said, we still have crazy things happening. Iowa State, which again has a terrific home court advantage in Hilton Coliseum, entered its game earlier this week against Houston with 10 of its 11 wins against quad 3 and 4 opponents. That didn't stop Iowa State from beating the Cougars and giving Houston its first loss of the season. UCF, in its first season in the Big 12, went to the Octagon of Doom last Saturday and lost to Kansas State by 25. And then a couple of days later, in its first ever home game, it was in a situation where it then returned to Orlando and beat Kansas of all teams. So there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to a lot of these results. I do think the other 2 winners against top 5 teams, Nebraska, who beat Purdue, and Mississippi State, who beat Tennessee, have the look of a team, though, that should be in the NCAA tournament. Very quietly, and I know this is music to your ears, a dream season is unfolding at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Nebraska has already beaten Michigan State and Purdue at home. Nebraska has also beaten Kansas State on the road, a win that will travel all the way to Selection Sunday. The Huskers, again, had their best start under Fred Hoiberg. They're trending towards being an NCAA tournament team. And I also think that Mississippi State, now that it has Tolu Smith back from a foot injury, isn't just a team that can make the NCAA tournament. Mississippi State is a team that could be like a root canal without the Novocaine for a higher seeded team in the round of 32. I look at Mississippi State and I see a team that if it is an 8-9 game or a 7-10 game, that's the type of team that could wind up in the Sweet 16 and beat a higher seeded team. I also want to give more credit to Iowa State with the Cyclones' opportunities that they'll have in the Big 12. You can see what Hilton Coliseum will be as a weapon. I also expect them to be in the NCAA tournament. But Ben, you know as well as I do, this is only January.
John, times are changing in college basketball, and certainly the odds market on the move as well. Some recent upsets here. We take a look at some of the favorites on the board. Purdue now sits at an 8-1 price to win the national championship. Houston at an 11-1 price, and Kansas at a 25-1. Teams learning new opponents in different conferences and how they play out. How do you view those 3 teams here on their march to madness here?
I wouldn't pick any of those 3 teams to win the national championship if I had to fill out a bracket if today was Selection Sunday. And the team right now that needs to be viewed as the team with the highest ceiling in the sport is Connecticut. Connecticut is 4-0 without Donovan Clingan. Connecticut is in a situation right now where it is learning to develop its bench without its All-American big man. Since Donovan Clingan has went out of the lineup, you've seen five-star freshman Steph Castle look the part. You've seen Hassan Diarra be in a situation where he is giving UConn more burst and more offensive production off the bench. And you've also seen Dan Hurley be in a situation where he has showed comfort in going to an inverted offensive lineup, either with Alex Caravan as a stretch five-man or, as he did last night against Xavier, with a five-guard look. And here's something that we have to hit home right now. All of the top teams are playing to be in the best possible position on Selection Sunday. UConn has more on the table, because if UConn is the number one seed in the East this year, it will play after multiple games in the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden, which is a pseudo home court for the Huskies, as we've seen in past years. UConn then in the NCAA tournament would play first and second round games at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and then regional games in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight in Boston. That means UConn, after concluding the regular season, would not potentially have to get on a plane until the Final Four, and the Huskies, after concluding the regular season, could play essentially home games until they go to Arizona for a chance to repeat as national champions.
UConn looking around at all the other top five teams that lost in the last 48 hours and saying, what's so difficult about playing an unranked foe on the road in conference action, going into Cincinnati last night against Xavier and winning by 5, covering as a 4.5-point road favorite. Other impressive road wins yesterday, UNC against NC State in Raleigh, Wisconsin. Its second road win in Big Ten play, winning by 11 in Columbus, covering as a 2.5-point underdog outright. John, another win yesterday, although not easy by any means for Penny Hardaway's Memphis Tigers. They do win by 6 in overtime, booked as a double-digit favorite, 107-101 against UTSA. A high-scoring affair in an extra session. Memphis, though, off to a very strong start this season. John, when you evaluate Penny Hardaway's crew in Tennessee, what's the best thing the Tigers do?
Well, Memphis is in a situation right now where they have great experience. They can obviously play big and small, but their ability to play small is inhibited a little bit by losing Caleb Mills for the season due to a knee injury. That was quietly a bit of a blow to Memphis's rotation. But I think the biggest opponent right now, guys, for Memphis moving forward till Selection Sunday is human nature. Memphis and Penny Hardaway, to his credit, loaded up that non-conference schedule with marquee opportunities, and the Tigers answered the bell in November and December. But now you're in a situation where, unless you play Florida Atlantic in American Conference play, every other game that you play won't just not really equal a good win, but if you fall short, it will equal a bad loss. So this is similar to the dynamic that John Calipari had when he was the head coach at Memphis, when he had those great teams, obviously, with Derrick Rose and Tyreek Evans and all those guys.
Winning the AAC this year, Memphis and Florida Atlantic, the two top dogs in that conference at plus 105 and plus 135. But, John, also, you can't leave out the boys on North Broad. Adam Fisher's Temple Owls, 150-1. Can they actually win this conference? I need some help here.
Well, look, I could do a whole show with you guys about what's went wrong with Temple's basketball program, and that isn't to slight Adam Fisher, who's a really good young coach and a terrific guy. But, Temple made a choice a long time ago to obviously invest in its football program and hope to build that up. And that has really inhibited the front porch of the university, which has been the basketball program. And there were a lot of Temple fans that I think took Fran Dunphy for granted for years. But Fran Dunphy's last season at Temple was in the NCAA tournament and lost to Dylan Windler and Belmont in the first four. I can't tell you how far away Temple is from the first four right now. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Temple doesn't have the brand that UConn has, obviously, in basketball, but Temple should take a page out of UConn's book and prioritize its basketball program as the front porch of the university, or else it's just going to really kind of stay where it is right now, which is in complete irrelevancy.
It seems like a two-team race in the American. Plus 105, the Tigers the favorites. The Owls of FAU after the magical Final Four run at plus 135. And when we look at Florida Atlantic this year under Dusty May, they have wins over Arizona, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, but losses to Bryant, Florida Gulf Coast, in Charlotte as recently as this past Saturday. FAU on the road tonight, John, as a 7.5-point favorite in the Big Easy against Tulane. What do you make of this FAU team this season?
Well, this is another tricky game tonight, Ben, for FAU against Ron Hunter's club. Kevin Cross obviously having a terrific season for Tulane, and Ron Hunter, somebody who, again, got a contract extension in the offseason, has slowly been building this Tulane program, just as he did at other stops like Georgia State and IUPUI. But, Florida Atlantic right now for the first time is not only having to deal with being the hunted, but it's also having to deal with playing in a better conference. With all due respect to the league that Florida Atlantic played in last year, it is playing against a higher level of competition, and it's not just Memphis. You had referenced the loss to Charlotte. We're going to see the Owls tested. And guys, it's not to the degree, I think, that, you're going to see if they took bad losses in Conference USA from a statistical perspective. We're not there yet in terms of the ancillary teams in this conference, but Florida Atlantic answered the bell in November and December by beating Butler, A&M, Virginia Tech, Arizona. But the more losses it takes, like it did against Charlotte, Florida Gulf Coast, Bryant, that will inhibit the type of NCAA tournament seed that this team can gain on Selection Sunday.
Taking a look in the Big Ten here, Michigan State going to take on the Illinois Fighting Illini. In this game, 2-1 in the Big Ten. Illinois is a top 10 program. Michigan State, and Tom, with a loss here, John, could fall to 1-4. What do you see tonight, Michigan State and Illinois?
It's the game of the night in college basketball. There's no doubt about it. And, the one thing that I've really seen for Illinois the last 3 games since Terrence Shannon Jr. was suspended indefinitely on rape charges was Marcus Domask has emerged as Illinois' go-to player. And Illinois does not have what it have. Was it? What do you say, Ben? Illinois doesn't have what it had with Terrence Shannon Jr. It's a tongue twister right there. I don't speak for a living, but it has enough to remain at the top tier of the Big Ten with Marcus Domask being a go-to player. And guys, I don't want to really get on Ben's bad side here, but when you look at the state of the Big Ten right now, we have to look at this league and the history of the league. In the last 3 seasons, this conference has had a combined 26 NCAA tournament bids and a minimum of 8 teams in the NCAA tournament per season. I would be very, very surprised if the Big Ten has more than 7 teams in the bracket on Selection Sunday. I for a long time thought that, it was going to be Purdue and everybody else, but Wisconsin is showing this is not a coronation for the Boilers. The 2 other teams I would probably forecast in the Big Ten top 4, Michigan State and Illinois, going head-to-head tonight in Champaign.
Listen, if this week has been any indication, the madness does not wait until March, although this is only January. John Rothstein, thank you very much. A best bet up next on the early line.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take a little
it.
piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. BV. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression this season. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Closing out our 3 hours together here on what has been a hectic but significant day on this Thursday on the early line on SportsGrid. I'm Ben Stevens. He's Donnie right side, and the SportsGrid app never leaves your side as long as you download it or scan the QR code on your screen. Available for download at both the Apple and the Play Store. Included in the SportsGrid app is 5-star plays. Those are known as best bets, and so are these. Before we say farewell on this Thursday, before we say goodbye, it is time for Bye Bye Bye. Thursday night, no football, but still Thursday night. What is Donnie Right-Side's best bet?
Yeah, we're going to go out to the West Coast here. Talked about the game earlier. It's the Phoenix Suns and the Los Angeles Lakers. Taking a look at the player points, and at a premium tonight could be, I'm going to take Anthony Davis over 28.5 points scored tonight, fresh off his 41-point output. He's going to play at least 35-plus minutes. If he plays well, the Lakers have a legitimate chance to win. This total up around 240. I'll take Anthony Davis, as I told you, to get into the 30s. But in this one, we only need 28.5. So 29 will get the job done tonight. Anthony Davis to the over.
Donnie, I wanted the best bet to beat Derek White, the over of his points props, Boston on a second leg of a back-to-back, but changing venue from Beantown out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin tonight to take on the Bucks. The Celtics booked as a dog for just the second time this year, getting 4.5 points from Milwaukee, but his number's not out yet. So who can I be sitting here giving out a best bet and give you a figurative number? If it's in the high teens, take the over. Only time Boston's been a dog this year, he scored 28 points because Jason Tatum was not in the lineup, or Jaylen Brown, one of the two. So let me give you an actual bet that has a number associated with it. This is crazy, man. This is honestly lunatic of me to do. A Big Ten road team to beat a ranked opponent on its own home floor has to happen tonight for Michigan State. Sparty. Plus 125, getting 2.5 tonight in the State Farm Center. What'd you say?
Maybe we'll have a poll tomorrow. If Izzo gets fired, how crazy would that be, Ben?
We're back tomorrow, Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern.